The last person I expected to hear from this Christmas was my mother. But there it was. An email, cold and polite as ever. I stared at the screen, blinking, half convinced I'd misread the sender's name. Celeste Whitmore. Not Jenna, not some family assistant like years past. No, this time it came directly from my mother. The subject line was as clinical as the message itself. Christmas Eve dinner invitation. After everything? After 7 years of silence, after I was scrubbed from family photos and wills alike, now they wanted to pretend I still had a seat at the table? Outside, Boston lay under a thin quilt of snow. It was still early, barely 7 a.m., but the sun had begun to rise, casting a silver haze across the rooftops. I sat cross-legged on my bed in my tiny studio apartment, holding the phone like it might explode. The last time I'd seen any of them in person was the Christmas after my father died. That was the year Philip moved in for good, bringing with him his son, his expectations, and his disdain for anything that didn't fit his blueprint of family, including me. 1 year later, I got a call from the family lawyer. "Your portion has been reassigned," he said, voice tight. "Per a codicil added by your mother and stepfather. You're no longer a beneficiary." I remember sitting in this very apartment, gripping the arm of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. No explanation. No apology. Just erased. So now, seeing this email felt like a ghost slipping through the cracks. I opened the message again, scanning the exact wording. "Dear Nora, the Whitmore family cordially invites you to join us for Christmas Eve dinner at 7 p.m., December 24th, at our home in Weston." Not your home. Just our home. Mel called before I even had time to process. "Did you get it?" she asked. No preamble. "Yeah," I said, rubbing my temple. "I got it." "So, are you actually going?" I paused. The silence between us buzzed with implication. "Yes," I said finally. "And I'm bringing a gift of my own." Mel whistled low. "You're serious." I stood and crossed the room, opened my drawer. Inside was a sleek envelope wrapped in protective plastic. I lifted it carefully, tracing the edges of the folded paper within. Inside were 2 documents: a service contract binding my company to provide proprietary analytics systems to Whitmore Capital, and the pre-signed termination letter that would end it. I still remembered the meeting where Philip had smugly claimed he preferred third parties to family, not knowing the system he signed for was mine. It was Mel's idea to keep the company name off the front-facing branding. Let him think he was too clever to be outsmarted by his own stepdaughter. The irony? I'd walked away from a bigger share when I exited. I took just enough to keep my name off the table, but my hands on the switch. I sat on the couch, the envelope resting in my lap. A single breath fogged the window beside me. Snowflakes slid down the pane like time itself trying to undo what had already passed. Mel's voice came again through the phone. "You know you don't owe them anything." "I know," I said, fingers curling around the envelope. "But this isn't for them. It's for me." That evening, I took out a gift bag, white, embossed with my initials in subtle gold. I slipped the envelope inside and tied it with a crimson ribbon. It looked festive. Innocent. Let them think I was coming back with open arms. Let them think I was still the same girl who begged for a place in their circle. They left me out of the inheritance. Let's see how they feel when I pull the plug on what they built since. The Whitmore house hadn't changed. Still expensive, still cold, and still not enough chairs. The driveway sparkled with a thin sheet of frost as I stepped out of the Uber, my boots crunching softly against the gravel. The air smelled of pine and privilege. The mansion stood before me like a monument to curated success. Columns wrapped in lights, a wreath larger than my torso fastened perfectly to the double doors. I tightened my coat, gift bag in hand, and rang the bell. A servant opened the door before it finished chiming. He offered a polite nod and gestured me inside, like I was an unexpected guest who showed up anyway. The warmth inside hit me with the scent of cinnamon, mulled wine, and fresh pine needles. The tree stood tall in the corner of the foyer, decorated with an almost militaristic precision. Color-coded ornaments, no clashing styles. Not one homemade decoration in sight. "Miss Walker," a voice said with forced cheer. Philip stood near the fireplace in the next room, drink in hand, dressed like a walking J.Crew ad. His smile was thin, brittle, calculated. "Philip?" I nodded, matching his tone. "Thanks for the invitation." He didn't answer, just sipped his drink, then turned to greet someone more important. The living room was full of the usual suspects. Family friends, clients dressed as friends, and blood relatives dressed like strangers. I spotted Jenna near the staircase, adjusting the bow on a present as if it were the most urgent thing in the world. Our eyes met. She flinched and looked away. Celeste stood by the piano, her hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a woman I didn't recognize. She looked older than I remembered, or maybe just smaller, like someone trying to blend into her own surroundings. She didn't come over. I didn't expect her to. A servant offered me wine. I took it without a word. The evening crawled. People mingled, exchanged hollow compliments, commented on how magical the tree looked, and boasted about holiday plans. My presence was acknowledged only in glances. Quick, measuring, unsure. Like I was a memory they weren't sure belonged here anymore. Dinner began with a toast. Philip, naturally. And then gifts were handed out with fanfare. Monogrammed headphones for Dylan. First-class tickets to St. Bart's for Jenna and her fiancé. A new Rolex for Celeste. Laughter, applause, hugs. Even the staff received Amazon gift cards in gold envelopes. No one called my name. I sat with my wine, quiet. I watched Jenna squirm in her seat, avoiding my eyes. Dylan caught my expression and smirked. Celeste looked toward me at last, then at the servant holding the remaining gifts. She tilted her head and gave a little shrug. "Looks like the store missed one," she said too brightly. "Oh well." The moment hung like mistletoe rotting on the ceiling. I waited. The room moved on, buzzing with conversation, and I, the unwanted note in their perfectly composed carol, sat there with my wine. Then I stood slowly, placing the glass on a side table. The bag in my coat was still warm from my body heat. I reached in and drew the envelope out, the silver ribbon catching the light like a blade. Calmly, I walked to the coffee table in the center of the room, where all the discarded bows and crumpled paper lay like an offering. I placed the envelope carefully on the polished wood. "No worries," I said softly. "Mine's right here." For the first time that evening, every eye turned to me. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I picked up my wine again and took a slow sip. The silence that followed settled across the room like snow. Soft, chilling, absolute. They gave each other Rolexes and spa weekends. I gave them a shutdown notice. The envelope sat in the middle of the table, untouched, its silver ribbon glinting faintly under the chandelier. Around it, empty wine glasses and torn wrapping paper created a messy mosaic of indulgence. No one moved. The party hadn't ended. Not officially, but the energy had. It was as if my gift had detonated a silent bomb, and now they were waiting for the dust to settle. Dessert was barely touched. Plates of flourless chocolate torte sat half-eaten beside abandoned spoons. Someone coughed. Celeste reached for her wine with a trembling hand, but missed the stem and had to try again. Across the room, Philip's associates exchanged glances. Businessmen who recognized a power shift, but weren't yet sure which direction it tilted. "I suppose you're wondering what's in the envelope," I said, standing slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. They all turned toward me. The room, so recently filled with fake warmth and luxury, now felt like the calm before a storm. I took a long breath and looked at each of them. My mother, eyes wide and unsure. Dylan, frozen with a glass in hand. Jenna, lips pressed tight like she could taste regret. "I started my own company 6 years ago," I said. "Most of you didn't know that. That's fine. I didn't build it for applause." I picked up the envelope, removed the ribbon, and opened it without drama. The papers inside were clean, precise. Copies of contracts, signatures, and a termination notice on top. "What is this?" Philip asked, his voice clipped. "I'll get there," I replied calmly. After college, I tried the job market. It didn't want me. I built something instead. Alongside Mel, my best friend. We didn't take investors. We didn't make headlines. We built infrastructure quietly and sold it smarter. I turned to the guests in suits. "Some of you may know the back-end logistics engine that Whitmore Capital has been using these past 2 years. What you might not know is that it's ours. Our company, Highlight Systems, was contracted as the main provider. We handle the routing algorithms, the supply chain data crunching, the predictive load balancing models." Philip's face had gone pale. "You're lying," he said. "We don't—" "Check your inbox." He blinked. "Now." He yanked his phone from his pocket, fingers jabbing at the screen. The silence deepened. "Effective immediately," I said, tapping the contract. "Our system is offline. The termination clause was triggered by breach of ethical standards, of which there are many examples I won't waste time recounting in front of your guests." A man in a navy blazer leaned toward Philip. "Wait, that's her company?" Celeste's chair scraped faintly against the hardwood as she backed away. Dylan muttered something inaudible. Jenna's mouth was open, but she couldn't seem to speak. I looked at Philip, watched him process what was happening. I recognized the moment when realization hit, the moment when arrogance met consequence. He slammed his palm against the table. "You're bluffing." I didn't flinch. "Check your inbox," I said again. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "The system is down. The backup access keys have been revoked. Your entire December load projections will not compute." The email pinged. I heard it. So did everyone else. He stared at the screen, blinking once, then twice. "Jesus," someone whispered. "Why?" Celeste finally said, her voice trembling. "Why now?" I turned to her, surprised she asked. "Because it's Christmas," I said. "And you all gave me so much over the years. Distance, silence, abandonment. I thought I'd return the favor." The silence after that felt louder than any scream. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to burn quieter. Philip's face had turned a shade I hadn't seen before. Not rage, not shock, but something more dangerous. Fear. Celeste slid her chair back further, distancing herself from him. Jenna burst into tears and bolted up from her seat. Dylan's hand trembled around his wine glass, but he couldn't bring it to his lips. I folded the empty envelope in half and slipped it back into my pocket. No one tried to stop me. He called me a nobody for years. Now he begged me to reconsider. In front of his guests. Philip's voice cracked first. "You're ruining Christmas," he bellowed, the words echoing off the vaulted ceilings like a tantrum in a cathedral. The guests jolted, some standing halfway, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Servants froze in their tracks, holding trays of untouched torte and champagne, eyes darting like they'd stumbled into a war zone. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. It wasn't the first time Philip had yelled at me, but it was the first time he did it while cornered. "You think this is smart?" he snarled, jabbing a finger toward me. "You just nuked $1 million contract. Do you even realize what you've done?" I raised an eyebrow, sipping the last of my wine. "Oh, I know exactly what I've done." "Millions," he repeated, pacing behind his chair. "Reputation, trust, future partnerships, gone. You just lit a match to everything." "You thought I'd stay quiet forever," I replied, my voice still calm. "You bet wrong." There was a flicker in his eyes, a flicker of something more fragile than rage. Panic, real visceral panic. Philip had always treated me like I was disposable. But now he saw me. Celeste's voice cut in, brittle and breathy. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I turned to her slowly. She was clutching the edge of the table like it was a lifeline. Her face had gone pale, lips trembling beneath her perfect lipstick. Her eyes shimmered with a glossy film of tears that had yet to fall. "No," I said quietly. "You meant to forget me. There's a difference." Her expression crumbled at that, like I'd stripped away the last layer of her denial. For a moment, she looked old. Not elegant, not pristine. Just tired. Worn by years of silence she had cloaked in plausible excuses. Dylan slammed his glass down. "This is disgusting," he spat. "You show up after years and do this? This is revenge, plain and simple." "Funny," I said, turning toward him. "You've never had to earn anything in your life, have you?" He glared at me. "You've inherited," I cut in. "A last name, a network, a reputation. And you still managed to grow up spoiled and small. You think standing up for myself is petty?" "No, Dylan. What's petty is a family that pretends one of their own doesn't exist, until she shows up with power." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Philip knocked his chair back and stormed toward the hallway. "I'm calling Richard," he growled. "He'll fix this. There's gotta be a clause we can sue on." His footsteps thundered away, followed by the slam of a door somewhere down the corridor. Silence settled again. Celeste looked up at me, finally letting the tears fall. "I didn't know," she whispered. I studied her. "You didn't want to," I replied. There was no venom in my voice. No heat, just clarity. The kind that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. "I had to survive without you," I said. "Now you have to live with who I became." For a long moment, the only sound was the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The golden candlelight flickered in polished silverware and untouched plates. Then, quiet movement. Jenna stood. Her chair barely made a sound against the hardwood. She didn't speak. Her face was blotchy, eyes red from holding back tears. She looked at me. Just looked. And then she stepped away from the table and followed me. "I didn't come here to ruin Christmas. I came because no one ever thought I would." The snow had thickened by the time I stepped outside. It fell in slow spirals, drifting past the manicured hedges and crunching beneath my boots as I walked down the front steps. The cold nipped at my cheeks, sharp and immediate, but I welcomed it. At least it felt honest. The night air was quiet in the way only winter could offer. Hushed, like the world was holding its breath. I stood beside my car, hands buried in the pockets of my coat, watching the frost gather on the windshield. The red taillights glowed faintly against the driveway's white sheet. No luggage, no gifts. Just me, as I had arrived. Somewhere inside, the mansion still pulsed with muted voices. I didn't need to go back in to know what was happening. Philip was probably yelling into a phone, cursing about legal fallout. Celeste might be pouring herself another glass of wine, staring out a window with that haunted, faraway look. Dylan would be sulking, muttering something entitled and meaningless. And Jenna, I wasn't sure. Until I heard the snow crunch behind me. Turning slightly, I saw her. Coat hastily thrown on, arms wrapped around herself, a small box clutched in her hands. "I figured you'd be out here," she said quietly. I didn't answer, just watched her approach. Her face looked tired but softer than before, like whatever mask she'd been wearing finally cracked under the pressure. "I didn't mean for tonight to go that way," she said. "None of us did." "You didn't mean for tonight to go this way," I corrected. "But the rest? The years? That was by design." Jenna flinched. The wind swept between us, ruffling the hem of her coat. She glanced down at the box. "I brought you something." She held it out. I didn't take it at first, just looked at the gold wrapping, the slightly crooked ribbon. "Should I open it now?" I asked. She gave a small shrug. "Up to you." I pulled off the ribbon and eased open the lid. Inside was a photo frame. Old, maybe a bit tarnished at the corners, but intact. Behind the glass, a faded snapshot. Two little girls sitting side by side on a swing set, cheeks flushed from laughter. Behind them, a man with warm eyes and tired hands. Our father. My throat tightened. I found it last summer, Jenna said, voice barely above a whisper. It was in one of Mom's old boxes. I kept it. I don't know why. I stared at the photo for a long time. You remembered him, I said finally. I never forgot, she replied. I just didn't know how to speak about it. The wind shifted again, and with it came memories I hadn't let myself feel in years. Of the night I left home at 19, suitcase dragging behind me on salted sidewalks, the cold biting into skin already raw from grief. Celeste had stood on the porch, arms folded. It's better if you leave, she'd said. No anger, just conclusion. As if that decision had already been signed and sealed. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you, I said, not for the gift, but for the gesture. It was enough. Jenna stepped closer. Do you think you'll come back? Someday? I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the little girl from the photo anymore. Neither was I. I don't think I need to anymore, I said. She nodded, blinking fast. Her fingers brushed my arm, a silent goodbye, and then she turned, walking back up the path toward the house. I placed the photo gently in the passenger seat. It looked out of place next to the leather and LED dashboard, like a relic from a different life. But it belonged with me now, not buried in some forgotten box. As I sat behind the wheel, the phone on the console lit up. 12 missed calls, all from Philip. I didn't touch it. A week later, Philip's company was bleeding clients. Mine was booked solid until April. It was the kind of victory that didn't need fireworks or applause, just numbers, graphs. Quiet stares of disbelief from former doubters and silence from those who'd once called me irrelevant. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, Boston looked like a world I had finally stepped into fully. Skyscrapers stood like old sentinels in the winter haze. Down below, people rushed in and out of revolving doors, coats pulled tight against the cold, unaware of the empire growing 30 floors above. 3 more platforms just confirmed integration, Mel said, flipping his tablet toward me with a grin. That's 32. We're at capacity until Q2. He was barely able to keep the excitement from his voice, but I didn't match it. I simply nodded, keeping my hands folded, gaze still locked on the skyline. And Whitmore? I asked, almost as an afterthought. Mel tapped twice and pulled up another dashboard. Total collapse? Number but hemorrhaging? Absolutely. 3 major clients jumped ship this morning. A couple are circling back. They want us now. I looked at him. And? They're asking for a new contract, he said slowly. Triple the original price. No questions asked. For a brief second, a flicker of amusement warmed my chest. Tell them we're not interested, I said. Let them learn to build from scratch, like I did. Mel nodded. Will do. He lingered for a moment as if expecting me to gloat or say something vengeful. But I didn't. I simply turned back to my desk. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't care. After Mel left, I opened my inbox. A new message sat at the top. From Jenna Whitmore. Subject, just the 2 of us. Date, December 29th, 10:14 a.m. If you're ready, I'd like to meet. No drama. Just the 2 of us. I owe you some things I never said. I stared at it longer than I expected. The email didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't make excuses. It didn't pretend. And that meant something. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened the drawer beside me and gently placed a small frame inside, the same one Jenna had given me a week ago. The photo inside still held its faded hues. 2 girls, 1 man, 1 forgotten summer. I closed the drawer slowly, the click of the latch quiet but final. That chapter was over. There would always be history. But I no longer needed to carry its weight in my pocket. The soft hum of the office wrapped around me. Outside the glass walls, my team was in motion. A dozen people in their 20s and 30s, building something real. They weren't legacy hires or silver spoon prodigies. They were fighters, like me. "Miss Walker?" A voice called through the intercom. "Your 11 a.m. is here." "Send them in," I said. I minimized the email from Jenna and pulled up the contract on my screen. Our new software suite, designed in-house, now ran on over 30 major platforms. My initials were embedded in the source code. The logo in the corner bore my company's name, not Philip's. This wasn't just success. It was proof. Proof that I could be erased from the will, ignored at the table, written out of the story, but still carve out a future with my own hands. I looked at the screen, letting the silence settle around me. Then I whispered, just for myself, "You left me out of the family, but you couldn't leave me out of the future." The storm she unleashed wasn't loud. It was precise. No screaming, no theatrics. Just truth, served cold and undeniable in a house that once prided itself on pristine appearances. What made it hit harder wasn't the noise, but the silence that followed. The look in Philip's eyes when power slipped from his fingers, the crack in Celeste's polished veneer, and the shift in Jenna's stance from silent bystander to quiet ally. For years, Nora had been the forgotten daughter, cut out of the will, left out of invitations, erased from family photographs as if her presence threatened the illusion they all clung to. But erasure has a price, and when the erased rise, they don't come back seeking inclusion. They come back with leverage, with clarity sharpened by years of silence. Nora didn't just return to a dinner table. She returned to reclaim dignity, rewrite the power dynamic, and remind everyone watching that being overlooked doesn't mean being powerless. Justice, when earned rather than handed down, strikes deeper. It doesn't always wear robes or come stamped with court orders. Sometimes it's an email sent at the right moment, a contract voided, a look exchanged across a dinner table that says, "I remember everything you tried to forget." Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reminder. That silence is not peace. That sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one they all agreed to ignore. And that healing doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it means walking forward, alone but in control. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you've ever been underestimated, cast aside, or told you don't belong, let this story be your signal. You don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to step back in with proof in your hands and fire in your spine. The rest will fall into place, like snow on a rooftop, silent and unstoppable. Thanks for reading. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support more narratives about justice, resilience, and revenge done right. Comment 1 if you felt the sting of betrayal and the satisfaction of seeing power flip sides.